Before we even begin the video, I want you to keep one question in mind. Was the capture of Capel Sevier even necessary? Leave a comment down below on your opinion of whether Operation Elephant needed to happen in the first place.
An Ontario infantry unit prepares for an assault on the ferry landing island of Capel Sevier. Used by the enemy for frequent attacks on the 1st Canadian Army, it presents a serious threat to operations. Tough enemy paratroops have been given orders to hold at all costs the base, which is 5 miles from the mouth of the Meuse. During the month, 2 attacks have been repulsed by the enemy. The third and final assault gets underway.
Despite the rather dramatic tone accompanying this newsreel footage, as they were wanting to do during the war, this is not footage of Operation Elephant, which was the code name for the attack at Capel Sevier. This is from the training that was done before the actual attack on the island by the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. The shots make it quite clear that this is training and not of the actual combat. As you're about to see here, they do a pretty good job in simulating the battle so they could show the folks back home.
With their small arms in the bottom of the canoes, clad in snowsuits for camouflage purposes, they close in on their objective. Heavy smoke screens are laid down to mask the main attack. An excellent smoke plan keeps the island completely blanketed during the crucial period. Heavy mortars firing both HE and smoke add their staccato chords to the crescendo of destruction. After 5 days of vicious fighting, the Germans are driven from their last bridgehead south of the Meuse River. Capel Sevier falls to Canadian arms.
What was the reality of Operation Elephant in the final, and that's right, I said final, as there was more than one organized attack against the island of Capel Sevier in January 1945. The island itself was twice attacked by the Poles, once by the British Royal Marines, and then finally by the 4th Armored Division of the Canadian Army. Another question that needs to be raised when talking about Capel Sevier is why were the Germans there in the first place? You can see on the map here, it's this tiny little island next to another much larger island on a smaller part of the Meuse River. There are 2 theories of why this happened. One is connected to the German paratroops and wanting to get some of the new paratroopers some battle experience, so putting them closer to the Allied lines so they can come in contact with them through patrols and all of that kind of stuff. Another one is the idea that the Germans wanted to push across the Meuse River in conjunction with the Ardennes offensive. So they needed somewhere to do this, and you need as many outposts and jump-off points as possible. So the thinking is that this was also one of those. Of course, that part of the offensive never happens, but this is the Germans occupy this area around December 20th and towards the end of that month. So there may have been some elements of that as well, because there was talk and some planning of launching the offensive in the area of Meuse and the 1st Canadian Army to go along with the battle that happened in the Ardennes. I'll do a quick overview of the 3 other organized attacks against Capel Sevier before Operation Elephant took place. The original attack of the 1st Polish Armored Division took place overnight on December 30th through 31st, 1944. The attack does not go well. It's noted some prisoners are taken, but the Poles take 46 casualties in the failed attack, as the Germans are well dug in and supported by what is noted as medium artillery, self-propelled guns, and mortars to their north. This is going to become a theme of the overall attacks. Initially, not enough Allied artillery supporting, and the Germans having the superiority of artillery in the area, repulsing the attacks. So following this original attack by the Poles, the Germans reinforced their position with more self-propelled guns in the area. The Poles renew the attack on January 7th, 1945. So the harbor of Capel Sevier itself is cleared by the 9th Infantry Battalion around noon that day, but the German paratroopers are well dug in, a dike along the area, and again aided by superior fire from mortars. No progress is made, and the Poles fall back. The next attack comes during Operation Horse on January 13th, 14th. By the 47th Royal Marine Commando. This attack does not go well. They've learned a little bit and decide to attack from 2 flanks, but this island has very little areas to hide during an offensive. It's very flat and very open. So the approaches are well covered by the enemy. So this attack by the commandos doesn't go well, and they suffer 49 casualties. At this point, the Allies realize they need to do something bigger if they want to get the Germans out of Capelle Sevier. So mid-January, as the attack of Operation Horse fails, there's a new plan for an operation, and this is where Operation Elephant comes in. It is given to the 4th Canadian Armored Division, which takes over the Poles position here in the front. The orders, as mentioned in the official Canadian Army history of this period of the fighting, emphasize preparation rather than speed to do this one, because the lesson had been learned that there was not enough supporting artillery to make this happen. And this is why we have the footage and photos of the preparations and the practice for the actual operations that you saw previously with the canoes and the artillery and the smoke and everything like that. So they have some time to sit and think about this. So the attack by the 4th Canadian Armored Division is given to one of their infantry battalions, the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. Unlike the previous Allied attacks, this one is going to be supported by a lot of artillery. This includes the guns of the 4th Canadian and 1st Polish Armored Divisions, along with the 4th Army Group Royal Artillery. And this one's also going to be supported by tanks of the 29th Armored Reconnaissance Regiment, that is known as the South Albertas, famously from the fighting in Normandy with Major David Curry, and heavy mortars of the Toronto Scottish, who were borrowed from the 2nd Canadian Division. However, at this time, air cover is reduced due to bad weather, with the overcast skies limiting what can be given on the day of the attack. The main attack of Operation Elephant is going to be done by A Company of the Lincoln Welland Regiment, supported by C on the right, that is from the east side, while B would attack from the left, or that is the west. A completely separate force would paddle down the Maas River in canoes from the east. Objective of this boat party was to land in the rear of the German positions and hopefully encircle them and take the harbor at Capelle Sevier very quickly. As we're about to see, that's not what happened at all. Things started off very poorly for the boat party. The ice along the riverbank delayed their advance down the river itself, making them late for the timing of the attack. They came under heavy fire from the north bank, which sunk several of the canoes, and they were forced to land further east of their objective than planned. As the communication logs noted, Officer and 15 other ranks proceeded on foot toward objective but came under intense enemy fire on fixed lines along dike. Own weapons were frozen and they were forced to withdraw back across the river. The rest of the attack fared no better. A Company was allowed to advance unmolested, and just as it was about to reach its objective, the Germans opened up fire from their positions around the harbor and launched a counterattack. At 9:55 a.m., it was reported that all officers of both A and C Company were casualties. This forced both companies to fall back from the island. The attack for B Company did not go any better, as it got within half a mile west of the harbor, which was the location of the company's objective, only to be counterattacked off of it. B Company, however, did not completely withdraw from the island. They dug in half a mile west of their objective and were reinforced by troops from D Company. They were supported by the battalion's anti-tank platoon on the right side of the battlefield that C Company had withdrawn from earlier in the day, which was relieved by A Company of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders of Canada at nightfall, which was supported by 2 South Alberta reconnaissance tanks. This is a key difference than the previous attacks on the island. Those forces did not dig in, while the Canadians did. This gave them a position from which to launch further attacks and take Capelle Sevier Harbor from the Germans. The German position was set up along the winter dike, which was to stop flooding during the winter months, in 2 houses that were codenamed Raspberry and Grapes. This formed the core of their defensive position. C.P. Stacey noted in the official history that, and the paratroopers fought with a determination that deserves the word fanatical. For 5 days, days of frigid misery for both sides, they resisted all power we could bring to bear. But in the circumstances, bringing power to bear was difficult. Sherman tanks were brought into the action across a rickety bridge at the east end of the island, and by rafting over the Oudamasha, but at this season the tracks which passed for roads on the island were almost impassable for armor. The only way for the infantry to move forward was in small dashes and then digging into each new position gained. They did so with the support of lots of artillery. It's noted that the 15th Field Regiment of the Royal Canadian Artillery fired over 14,000 25-pounder rounds during the operation. The Argylls recorded on the 29th that the shelling had rid the island completely of the thin layer of snow that had covered it, and a platoon commander asked for reinforcements not wearing the white camouflage snowsuits that had been used so far due to the lack of their usefulness. It is with these small advances that Capelle Sevier was finally taken. January 29th, the Argylls finally took Grapes, the Easterly House, and a few men reached Raspberry, but could not capture it. On the evening of the 30th, they took Raspberry. It's at this point that the Germans withdrew from the island overnight. Early on the morning of the 31st, the Lincoln and Welland Regiment, coming in from the west, made contact with the Argylls at Raspberry. It's noted no Germans, except prisoners, remained alive south of the main stream of the Maas. Both sides suffered heavy casualties for such a small portion of land. There are no German official statistics for losses during Operation Elephant. 1st Canadian Army estimate for German losses during Operation Elephant was 145 killed and 64 wounded, plus 34 prisoners. It's said that the 6th Parachute Division estimated between 300 to 400 serious casualties, plus 100 more men frostbitten. Because of their ability to still control crossing of the river, it's noted that no more than 150 fighting men were on the island for the Germans at one moment. Canadian losses were very high. The Lincoln and Welland Regiment suffered 179 casualties, 50 of which were fatal. The Argylls had 48 casualties, 13 being fatal. The South Albertas had 7, including 2 officers killed by snipers. In his conclusion about the fighting on the island, C.P. Stacey compares this battle to another one that the Canadians had in Italy. On a smaller scale, the fighting at Campbell-Severe recalls that at Ortona in Italy 13 months before. In both cases, Canadian infantry and armor were locked with German paratroopers in protracted struggles, which cost ourselves and the enemy losses larger than the immediate objective seemed intrinsically to be worth. In both, the objective required a certain symbolic significance, was contested with fierce obstinacy, and in both the Germans ultimately gave up. At the time and later, many Canadian soldiers certainly thought that our costly victory at Campbell-Severe gained only, and here Stacey quotes Hamlet, a little patch of ground that hath in it no more profit but the name. Remember to leave a comment down below about your thoughts if Operation Elephant was worth the high cost.